Good evening in Mexico. Good morning in China. Welcome to panel 6, New Challenges to Higher Education and Research. In this panel, we will discuss the challenges faced by higher education institutions as a result of the pandemic, the role played by the humanities and social sciences in this context, in addition to analyzing the effect caused in the Chinese economy, which have affected employment. I am very pleased to introduce our panelists. Professor Jessica Martinez Rosas is in the place of Professor Concepcion Barron since she's sick and could not attend. Professor Silvia Yarguli and Professor Gao Wen-Shu. We will start with the presentation of Professor Jessica Martinez. She is professor and researcher of the National Autonomous University of Mexico. She's going to talk about the challenges to higher education and research strategic adaptations. Professor Martinez, you have 15, 20 minutes for your presentation, please.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Mexico and China. Thank you, Mrs. Connelly. Can you hear me? Okay, thank you. Well, our presentation is named New Challenges to Higher Education and Research, Strategic Adaptations Made by Institutions, Protection Measures, Distance Learning, Digital Tools, How to Study COVID-19. Well, I would like to start this analysis from the possibility of thinking about the present that now gives us so much time and the opportunity to be together. Our present marked by COVID-19, an infectious disease caused by the coronavirus that has been discovered more recently. The first question is, what brought COVID-19 to the present and which changes are taking place in all orders of life, with specific attention to teaching and research. Context. The first human cases are associated with a wildlife market in Wuhan City, close contact between animals that do not normally live together in nature and which only humans have the ability to bring together, can result in an unknown virus acquiring the ability to jump from one host to another one and be immediately transmitted between people. In the case of the new coronavirus, it is thought to have jumped from bats to mammals immediately, perhaps the pangolin, and from there to humans. With no history of this type of virus, the fatality rate remains one of the biggest unanswered questions of this pandemic. This is because not all people infected with the virus develop symptoms, and those who do develop symptoms do so to varying degrees, from mild and moderate symptoms to severe illness, pneumonia, and death. The WHO used a declaration of pandemic on March 11, 2020. Currently, the spread of the coronavirus around the world has not slackened yet and reaches more than 12 million cases by July 10, 2020, a figure that is increasing every day. The epidemic spread to Southeast Asian countries, and after China, Thailand was the first country to register a first positive case of COVID-19. A week later, cases began to be registered in the USA, Europe, and the Middle East. The emergence of COVID-19 called into question scientific and technological advances, medical, mathematical, biological, philosophical, educational, and religious knowledge, among others. It also cast doubt on the entire population, the scientific, business, and government communities. It revealed new forms of relationships with others, with medical knowledge, and with the world of work and school, between teachers and students, with the economic, commercial, and cultural environment, in short, with everything related to daily life. Finally, it updated the right to health, education, work, gender equality within the framework of care for oneself, others, and nature, not only as hegemonic discourse, but as a social demand that cannot be postponed. Based on this brief approach, this paper will address the COVID-19 as a discursive event in which deserve epistemological perspectives rooted in philosophy and pedagogy are intervened in order to make an issue of what is currently happening and call us to reflect not only on the causes, but also on its future. The event is what emerged without warning, which bursts in unexpectedly, which disrupts temporarily, leaving for a moment everything unadjusted. Health and disease processes. The categories of health and disease have been historically constructed and immersed in epistemological, theoretical, political, and cultural debates. Towards the end of the 70s of the 20th century, the International Conference on Primary Health Care, organized by the WHO and UNICEF in Alma Ata, marked by a milestone in the world's public health, expressing the need of urgent action by all governments, all health and development workers, and the world community to protect and promote the health of all people of all the world. The World Conference held in Adelaide, Sundsvall, Jakarta, Mexico, Bangkok, Nairobi, Helsinki, and Shanghai promoted the development of a framework for action based on proposals for healthy public policies, as well as enabling environments of health, the development of personal skills, the strengthening of community action, and the reorientation of health services. To understand the articulation between living conditions and health situation implies assuming a different epistemological perspective that makes possible to overcome the anthropocentric notion of health, which defines it as inherent to the human being living aside. Reductionist approaches and advancing in broader relational processes. Especially, Agamben recognizes that since the Greeks, the source of the sovereignty in political power is found in a double movement that allows at the same time to exclude biological life from the law, while introducing it through the state of exception. The Greeks had no single term to express what we understand by the word life. They used two terms that, although traceable to a common etymological root, are semantically and morphologically distinct. Zoe, which would express the simple fact of living common to all living beings, animals, men, or gods, and bios, which indicated the form or way of living proper to an individual or a group. Foucault and Agamben agree that life and death are never, by themselves, only medical problems, but also political and moral ones. Life has to be included in some way in the state because it symbolizes what most treatments, what most irremediably could put in check the stability, normality, and homogeneity of political life. In other words, the greatest threats to political life come from life and its ups and downs, diseases, population growth, mortality, epidemics, pregnancies, abortions, accidents, disabilities, etc. Because in the end, the Zoe would be that shapeless state without concrete content. For a disease to be generated, two elements must converge: an individual and internal condition of an organism associated with the health conditions of people, and an external cause, in this case caused by SARS-CoV-2. In the case of the pandemic that concerned us, the internal conditions are no longer looked and individually, both as a product and result of the living, socioeconomic and environmental conditions of the population, towards a new normality. Well, we all ask ourselves that mean this new normality, and the answer has many edges. Does it mean going out into the street after a long confinement, sharing with our loved ones again into face-to-face way, activating the economy, returning to classes, opening shops? Those are only few of the questions in which it is possible to recognize a situation of conjecture that nevertheless tends to leave aside a deep structural analysis of what the pandemic has meant to its impacts and all orders of life. The in-depth questions would be either, will governments reorientate public policies for healthcare and education? Will strategies be built for the achievement of equity interviewed and stressed by social, economic, and cultural inequalities? From these approaches, it is necessary to clarify what will be meaning of normality in time and space of post-pandemic. If we consider that the norm is the Latin translation of square and the normalis means perpendicular, we know almost everything there is to know about the domain from which the meaning of the terms norm and normal emerged, terms that were transferred afterwards to a wide variety of other domains. A norm, a rule, is what serves to do justice, to instruct, to straighten. To normalize, to establish rules means to impose a demand on an existence, on a data whose variety and disparity are presented, with regard to demand more as something immediately and hostile than simply as something strange. In the current context, it's necessary to think about which health, cultural, and educational requirements are imposed on our daily lives and which requirements will prevail in the future, taking into account that the normative regulations incorporated in social practices constitute the sticking points between life and the application of power. Let us not lose sight of the fact that the norm is a principle of legitimacy of the wielding of a power center on life, whether it be in life manifested in corporal individuality or in the life of the species, which means that discipline or biopower base their action on the norm's capacity to produce mechanisms to invade, encircle, invest, administer, extend, and empower life. Therefore, power is not only a mechanism for repression, but also a constant struggle between what human beings must be and their provocative and challenging behaviors. Epidemiological studies have shown a cosmopolitan distribution of various parasites, viruses, and bacteria which affect the population differently depending on their quality of life, such as stated Foladori, the degree of prevailing social inequality caused by extreme conditions of poverty, employment, and precarious work creates an environment that is not very favorable to the development of a healthy society. However, in addition to healthcare, the great challenge now is the coming economic crisis, which will generate a high rate of unemployment and the possible appearance of what has been called holding, a situation in which when companies go bankrupt, other ones take over the control and become majority shareholders, dominating and centralizing the economies. On the other hand, the WHO recognizes that the pandemic has been a threat to people's health, social welfare, and national economies. Arguments and change in education. Nowadays, it seems that the argument for change towards a technology-mediated education is installed in the education systems in an obligatory way and as a response to this health crisis, and that the direction of the change concerns the educational proposals of governments, institutions, technologists, academics, teachers, or students. The educational arguments have been put forward from various perspectives and policies, whether conservative making explicit resistance and disadvantage, or those whose concern is oriented to the insertion of students in a globalized world. We also find somewhat tautological reasoning based on the idea that the school is irreplaceable, indispensable, and necessary. Scler raises three arguments that have appeared in different moments in the educational discourse, and in the current circumstances, it makes sense to recover them in a critical way. Those are completeness, the fabrication of the future, and the logic of explanation understanding. In relation to completeness, he points out that the school is there because there are differences in the subjects that deserve to be complete. It serves to complete the other. The arguments based on the fabrication of the future refer to thinking in static and universal temporality from the present and working in a single direction to achieve it. And finally, the logic of explanation understanding is centered on a teacher-student relationship in conditions of inequality. This argument seems to have set aside to conserve for the other and matters of respect, acceptance, and tolerance, although they are values that give meaning to existence and to living together among human beings. At this time, is it essential to place at the center of discussion humanist values in education, which should be based on respect for life and human dignity, equality of rights, social justice, cultural diversity, international solidarity, and responsibility. Although those values have been recognized in many of the diverse writings generated during the contingency, the indifference or impotence shown at times in diverse spaces by the decision makers is a matter of concern. Strengths, contradictions, and conflicts. The integration of technological developments with the classroom constituted a strategy that was implemented in the various educational scenarios during the pandemic. This was a big challenge for institutions, teachers, and students, impacting the personal and professional life of the community. At your notice, a series of changes of various kinds were generated. In this regard, Purples points out that the change represent opportunities and challenges for teaching and learning, among which we can find those that promote learning as a continuous process, integrated into the flow of human activities, those that promote learning as a situated and contextual process, those that promote reflective learning, those that promote collaborative learning, those that promote teaching under a model oriented toward partnership with the students, those that integrate formal, informal, situated, and experimental learning, those that promote new relationships with other actors in the learning process, parents, workplaces, among others. And finally, those that promote opportunities for ubiquitous learning by teachers themselves. Each of those changes brings with it potentials and possibilities to continue learning, among which we can highlight the ubiquitous learning made possible by technological devices, the collaborative work that is fostered through these means, and the easy communication, although the objective continues to be the achieve education as a human right. A principle set forth international normative frameworks and in which the states must be warrantors, ensuring respect, compliance, and protection of the right of education. Burbles states that public education is still the only common resource shared by the students from all types of contexts, and the teacher is the focal point for recognizing the responding to the differences raised. Nevertheless, access to technologies is getting more complex due to social and cultural inequalities, which are making another type of inequity. In addition, it's necessary to take into account that integrating technologies into the curriculum requires the establishment of more profound dialogue with contents, with teachers, and also with teaching beliefs and practices, building bridges between all of these, overcoming of incorporation ICTs and emerging measures only. Because of the time, to close, I would like to pick out a quote of Berardi that summarizes my conclusions. Neither a will nor political decisions, no financial intervention getting out of the global crisis caused by the coronavirus depends on the imagination, on the power to create a new reality far from the dangerous normality we were living, and led us to the convulsion of autumn. Thomas, 2020. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Martinez. Very well interesting, your presentation, and we will talk about some issues later. Now, let me introduce you, Professor Gao Wenshu, Professor and Dean, the School of Economics, University of China's Academy of Social Sciences. He's going to talk about the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on employment in China and its response. Professor Gao Wenshu, you have 15-20 minutes for your presentation.
Thanks, Professor. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Wait a minute. Okay. Thanks, Chairman, and hi, everyone. I'm very happy to have this opportunity to report my study on the impact of COVID-19 on China's employment and some policy suggestions. My name is Wenshu Gao. I'm a scholar in the University of Cass. My major is labor economics, and my field is mainly related to the employment, human resource development, and social security. Here is my presentation. The main contents include 3 parts. The first one, I will introduce the economic growth, some forecast to China's 2020, the economic growth rate. And the second part, I will report my research on the effect of the COVID-19 on China's employment. And the last one is some policy suggestions. Mainly based on my research, I give some suggestions to deal with the impacts. Okay, now let's take a look at part 1. China's economic growth in 2020 in the context of the COVID-19 epidemic. For the recent years, China's economy has been growing very fast. And in the past 40 years, the average growth rate China's economy is about 9 to 10% every year. In the past 10 years, and the growth rate went down, but it's still very high. And in the past 3 or 4 years, the growth rate, annually growth rate, still about 6% every year. And for the COVID-19 context, in early January 2020, the COVID-19 epidemic appeared in Wuhan, and only in a very short time, it had appeared in all China. Thanks to the efforts of the Chinese people, and only 2 or 3 months later, the epidemic in China has been effectively controlled. Due to the impact of the epidemic, China's economy fell off a cliff in the first quarter of 2020. You can see in the picture, and in the first quarter of 2020, the growth rate of the economy dropped 6.8% based on a year-on-year level. And compared with the last quarter, the growth rate decreased by 10%. So it's a very large decrease. But we can see at the second quarter, the growth rate rebounded much and recovered. The economy recovered very fast compared with the first quarter. The economy increased more than 10% quarter by quarter. So it should be regarded as a strong rebound. So despite the fierce outbreak of COVID-19 and the strong leadership of the Chinese people and the Chinese government, and thanks to the hard work of the whole country, the epidemic situation has been quickly improved, and the order of production and life resumed at a faster pace. So it's the economic growth, the first and second quarter of China. And this picture shows the first industry, the second industry, and the tertiary industry affected by the epidemic. We can see that all the 3 industries or sectors are all influenced by a very large in the first quarter. All decreased very, very sharply. And the added value has a larger decline. But in the second quarter, all the 3 industries, the added value, especially the second industry, realized better and faster recovery. So it's the 3 industries, the recovery. This table shows the different institutions and scholars forecast China's economic growth rate in 2020. And for the IMF, and it expects China's economy to grow by 5.6% in 2020, and its benchmark is 0.4% percentage points lower than its previous forecast for before the COVID-19. The IMF, and the second one is the Standard Chartered Bank. It forecasts China's growth rate in 2020 is about 5.5% before the COVID-19, and after COVID-19, it forecasts only 4% the growth rate. So also cut its forecast by 1.5 percentage points. And Moody expects China's economy to grow by just 3.3% in 2020. And the Lin Yifu, the most famous economist in China, he works in Beijing University and is very, very famous. He believes that China's economic growth in 2020 is about maybe 3 to 4%. So although the Chinese economy has shown a clear trend of improvement after the epidemic has been effectively controlled, but we still need to remain cautiously optimistic about China's economic growth in 2020. We tend to choose the low plan of the forecast results of the major domestic and foreign institutions and scholars mentioned above. I myself choose the forecast is around maybe 3% in 2020. The China's economic growth rate is 3%. A moment ago, I read a report on the internet from Chinese scholars. The growth rate maybe in China in 2020 is about 2%. It depends, but I think maybe it's around 3% growth rate. It's my opinion. So let's talk about the second part, which is the impact of the COVID-19 on China's employment. The slowdown in economic growth, coupled with the impact of the COVID-19 epidemic, has had a considerable impact on China's employment in general. Accommodation, catering, transportation, tourism, and other industries have been greatly affected by the COVID-19. First, let's see the impact on catering industry. Depends on a national survey. The hospitality industry loss was around 70% of its output in the first quarter in China. So it can concluded that the job loss is nearly is about 70%, because in China there were about 4 million employees work in the catering industry. So we can calculate that maybe the COVID-19 will has led to more than 2.8 million job loss in the first quarter in the catering industry. It's my calculation. It only my own opinion. It depends. So it's the employment impact on catering industry. And about the tourism industry. So the epidemic has hit tourism very hard. Based on a national research report, the COVID-19 has caused the tourism industry at least 60% loss of its output in the first quarter. So the job loss of tourism industry will also reach more than or about 60%. I have checked the data from the National Bureau of Statistics in China. In 2018, they are about 3.75 million people work in the tourism industry. So we can estimate that the COVID-19 epidemic will cause at least about or more than 2 million job loss to the tourism industry in the first quarter. So it's the employment effect on the tourism industry. And also we can look at the culture and entertainment industry. The employment in the cultural and entertainment industry has been seriously affected by the epidemic. The COVID-19 epidemic has affected all aspects of the cultural and entertainment industry. With performances suspended, cinemas closed, and festival events cancelled. So nearly 80% of the surveyed companies were completely on lockout. Nearly 90% of the micro or startup companies, the middle or small companies were completely on lockout. And over 50% of large enterprises were completely on lockout. So we can calculate the job loss. It's about a job loss is about okay, more job loss will about more than 80%. 80%. So it's the employment impact on the cultural and entertainment industry. And now I move to the transportation industry. Employment in the transportation industry has been severely affected. According to the data released by the Ministry of Transport, the commercial passengers volume of the whole society fell by about 80% year on year. And on January 21st, commercial vehicle traffic on national highways dropped by about 80% month on month. So the data are from the Ministry of Transportation. So we can see the job loss. Under the condition of constant level of productivity, the job loss of cultural and entertainment, the job loss in the transportation industry will also drop by about 80%. 80%. So it is estimated that COVID-19 caused at least 2.18 million jobs in the transportation sector in the first quarter in 2020. It's a table. In short, due to the sufficient demand caused by the decline in household demand, the decline in the production and operation of companies, the China's economic growth rate declined much and led to a very large job loss in most industries, such as especially in the catering industry, tourist industry, cultural and entertainment industry, and transportation industries. So let's move to the last part. The third part, we talk about how to deal with this effect of COVID-19 on China's employment. The first one, I think, we should promote telecommuting, working from home, flexible work, and other new ways of working to fight against the COVID-19. Due to the need of epidemic prevention and control, the movement of people and the normal attendance are restricted. So new working methods, such as digital technology, it has an advantage to break through time and space constraints, changing the traditional ways of economic operation, and providing strong support for epidemic prevention and control. So, so it's a first suggestion I suggest to develop and strengthen the data industry. The
2 minutes, Professor Gao.
Thank you. And the second one, regarding employment structure, especially a special policy support should be provided to industries such as the catering industry, tourism industry, cultural and entertainment industry, and the transportation industry, because all the 4 industries are affected much among all the industries. So we should focus first on the 4 industries. So the government should give special subsidies and support to the industries. And the third suggestion, in terms of the population structure or employment, policy and financial support should be adopted to promote the employment of key groups, such as graduate students and the migrant workers and the older workers. So it's a third suggestion I give. The last one, we should develop a digital economy and new economic firms to develop the new points of employment growth. Since the outbreak of COVID-19, the demand for online education, telecommuting, online entertainment, online healthcare, and e-government has soared. And the employment opportunities have increased significantly in these areas. So I suggest that we should strengthen to develop the digital economy. Maybe it's the most important way to prevent the effects from the COVID-19. So I have just reported the impact of the COVID-19 outbreak on China's economy and China's employment, as well as some policy suggestions on how to deal with the situation. That's my presentation. Thank you for listening. Thanks, Professor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Gao. I agree with you. There are many problems in the Chinese economy now, and especially it's difficult for the workers also peasants, but we will discuss later about this. Now, let me introduce Professor Silvia Giorguli Saucedo. She is president of El Colegio de México, and also she's researcher, and she's going to talk about the importance of research and social sciences and the humanities in times of pandemics. Professor Silvia Giorguli, you have 15-20 minutes for your presentation. Professor Giorguli.
Thank you, Marisela. Thank you for the introduction. I'm very glad to be here in this panel regarding the challenges to higher education and research. And I'm also, as I mentioned in the inaugural address, I do think that sharing experiences such as the ones that Professor Gao has mentioned for China, in my case about universities in Mexico, is a way to move forward, and I'm very much looking forward to the discussion afterwards. I'm going to share a PowerPoint presentation. Okay, and I think, yeah, can you all, everybody, can you see it clearly? Okay, so in my presentation, I'm going to focus on the case of higher education in Mexico and the challenges towards the post-COVID era. So I won't talk too much about what the strategies that we are conducting right now to face the sanitary contingency, but I will talk more about how we should be preparing for the implications in the post-COVID era. I decided to focus my presentation in two aspects. First, I will make a very quick review on the state of higher education in Mexico, and afterwards I will present some of the reflections on how we are handling the current situation and what we can expect to be the challenges. I added challenges to the ones that we already have. So higher education in Mexico has been expanding rapidly. This graph goes all the way to 2017, but the figures for 2020 would be now the enrollment of students in higher education in Mexico is around 5 million. No? So what we can see is a very rapid increase in the number of students enrolled in universities and research centers with graduate programs. This is both undergraduate and graduate programs. Now, in terms of coverage, we can also see an increase in the percentage of the students who should be enrolled in a higher education and are actually enrolling it after finishing middle school. In the case of Mexico, again, we can see, especially during the last 2.5 decades, a rapid growth in coverage. However, we are still lagging behind many of the other Latin American countries, European countries, and of course, we are lagging behind in terms of China. So we have a large challenge in terms of encouraging a more rapid growth of the coverage in higher education, of the spaces in universities for the young population that is finishing middle school. Now, if we think of it in terms of projections and what we would like to, let's think that we would like to reach a 50% coverage by the year 2030. That means that we will need to add another 1 million students to the higher education system. But this 50% is a very conservative figure. We would still be below most of the, not most, but many of the Latin American countries, such as Argentina and Uruguay and Peru, for example. And I think that the idea would be more to move towards a target of 70% coverage. That would mean increasing the system, which now has around 5 million students, to 7.5 million, which sort of looks as a very difficult target, but well, those are the demographic scenarios in terms of the potential increase in the coverage. What we can see now in the case of the higher educational system, it's not only an issue of coverage. The system is highly stratified. It includes large public universities. It includes universities and institutes that are focused on technological higher education. It has multicultural or indigenous universities, research centers which provide mainly options for graduate students, and the private sector. If we look at the proportion and the distribution between public and private universities, is between 80% of the students, especially at the undergraduate level, are in public universities, and 20% is attended by the private sector. But we can also find, and it's something that we can trace back at the prior levels in education, that is middle school and in elementary school, that the system is very stratified and it offers different types of education in terms of quality and in terms of resources available to students. However, we should say that there has been a large generational change related to this access to higher education. And in this graph, what we have is the proportion of men and women in two age groups which had access to a college degree. So if we look, for example, at the population which is between 15 to 64 years of old, only 15% of the men have at least a college degree. And we see here especially a disadvantage for women. When we look at the younger generation, those who are 30 to 34 years of age, what we find is an increase, more people getting a college degree, but especially gains for women at the tertiary level. So we have this combination of scenarios where the number of students has increased, the coverage has improved, there have been large gains, especially for women, but where we are still lagging behind other countries in the region, and where we have this problem of stratification and differences in the quality of education and resources for education. One issue is the federal spending on higher education and postgraduate education. In the last years, there has been a stagnation in terms of the percentage of the GDP and the resources that are invested publicly in higher education. So if you look at it again as another data, what we see is an increase in the number of students, but a stagnation in the amount of resources invested in higher education. No? So in a certain way that can be interpreted as a loss when we look at it in terms of the funding per student. So this is sort of a quick review. So this is a quick review of the state of higher education before COVID-19. What can we expect after COVID-19? And we do not have the data yet. It's not like I was amused to see the figures that Dr. Gao presented with very precise data around job losses. In our case, what we have is sort of the trends that we are starting to register, but we do not have the exact data or exact figures yet. So I summarize what we have discussed and found so far regarding the impact of COVID on higher education in three major challenges. And I should say that one of the issues, and the reason I wanted to present first this quick overview, is because the challenges related to COVID-19 interact and add to the old challenges that we were already facing in higher education. And probably the largest challenge has to do with educational inequalities. What can we, so again, looking at the picture before COVID-19, even though there has been an expansion on higher education in general, when you look at it, there are large differences in the term of access to university between students from rural and urban zones, by socioeconomic status, by region. And here I'm just showing an example. If you look at it divided by states in Mexico, you have, for example, Mexico City with an coverage close to 70% in 2014. But then you have another set of states who have less than 20% of coverage in the same year. No? So I think this graph shows very clearly the kind of educational inequalities that we have, that we are facing at the moment in Mexico. Now, COVID-19 has taught us that to this educational inequality, we are adding new challenges or new disadvantages that increase or that will potentially increase the gaps. The first one has to do with this process of dropping out. As I mentioned, we do not have still the exact data, but what we have found is that there's that universities are reporting a process of students dropping out, and we can expect that those in the most disadvantaged position in terms of socioeconomic terms or in terms of the places where they live, the access to technology, etc., will have higher risks of dropping out. Second, it has to do with the differences in the access to technology and distance learning among universities, professors, and students. No, for example, following on what was mentioned in the prior presentations, access to internet, to the digital economy is fundamental in this transition that we have handled in the recent months. But we also know, and now it's even more evident, that the access to good internet, to the computers necessary, to the platforms to move to long distance learning are different among universities across Mexico, also professors, and especially among students. Another issue that increases these gaps in educational inequality has to do with the differences associated to the learning environment. No, everybody who's teaching now with this new modality of distance learning sees that students have different dwelling conditions. Some had a space to study, some others had to share the space with other house responsibilities or with other students in the same household. Some students had to combine studying with other activities, for example, taking care of younger siblings or taking care of elder or taking care of those who are sick. Because of the economic situation, we expect an increase on the number of students combining work and study. And there are also other characteristics, for example, an increase in domestic violence that has been registered in the last month, that of course, that has an influence on the learning environment of our students. So that would be the first challenge. A second challenge has to do with the way that we organize the educational system, which can be defined as the rigidity or the lack of flexibility in the structure and organization of the educational system. Listening to what Jessica was saying, I think that one of our problems is that we may be very clear on the diagnosis of what we need, but once you try to move that into the actual practice of the educational, of the education or the classroom, it is more difficult. For example, everybody may agree that we need to incorporate better digital technologies and distance learning, and we move very rapidly into using these platforms, but we did not necessarily arrange our educational plans, the curriculum, the courses to this change, no? So that is something that sort of illustrates this lack of flexibility in the educational system. Second, well, of course, that we need to work, and there are differences in terms of the professor's abilities to adjust their teaching system to distance learning. Somebody that can be a great teacher in a large seminar with students in a classroom may need to adapt the way that person has been teaching for decades into what is needed for distance learning, no? And that is something that doesn't happen in an automatic way. It has to be attended. A third thing has to do with the strategies to evaluate learning losses during the sanitary emergency and design strategies and actions to compensate them, no? So we know, for example, that we will not be able to cover everything that we had originally planned to cover in our curriculum or in our courses. We know that we need to adjust because the learning process is different when you move to distance learning. And now one of the challenges is what we're gonna do to compensate those losses in what students are learning. Fourth, that this is something that you find across different universities, the report of students that have anxiety, depression, and of course it's an issue that has to be dealt with institutionally. Some institutions already have structures that can respond to this demand or needs for attention to the mental health of students, but not all of them, and there's also differences among universities. And fifth, so we have this problem that we need to adapt our programs. We need to, for example, update the technological resources within the universities. We will probably need to make changes to the infrastructure once we return, for example, in terms of the way the classrooms are organized. But we have to do this in a context where public expenditure is decreasing year by year. No? So that makes it very difficult to do planning in the medium and long term. And the third and final challenge has to do with labor opportunities for students transitioning into the labor market or which had recently finished their tertiary education and were starting their labor trajectories. And where were we before COVID-19? This is a graph that shows the percentage of college graduates that are working in non-professional occupations by age group. So this graph shows this lack of coincidence between what one studies and the kind of job that that person is getting. No? So what we see in time, and I'm just gonna focus on this red wine bar, what you see is an increase in the population that is finishing higher education, but getting a job that does not correspond to his or her qualification. So this is a problem that we had before COVID-19, and it has to do with the situation, especially for the problem, especially for the young generations. Here we see almost half of those with a college degree that were below 26 years of age were not in jobs corresponding to their education, and even it decreases with age, but it's still very high even for those 30 years and older. So to this challenge, the situation of COVID-19 adds new issues. For example, so we have now students graduating with an adverse labor market, where there's a slowdown in job creation, where there was already a prior situation of large youth unemployment, and a reduction in salaries and in the deterioration of job conditions in certain sectors of the economy. Second, there was already before a lot of labor rotation, especially for the young population. What we are expecting is to find an increase in labor rotation. And third, so here Dr. Gao talked in general from the perspective of labor markets and labor economy. When you look at it from the perspective of what we are teaching students, there are changes and trends in the labor markets that need to be considered in the planning of higher education. We need to think on whether what we're teaching is getting obsolete, on how to articulate better higher education with the economic trends, how, for example, again, related to what Dr. Gao presented, how do we give tools for our students to integrate better into this digital economy, a larger collaboration and communication with the productive sector, and also very important, something that other universities in Asia have been pushing in a very efficient way, the need to approach to lifelong learning as a way to help people adapt in all these changes that are even occurring even faster given the COVID situation that we're currently going on. So this would be like, I mean, there are more issues that we can talk about. I think these three challenges sort of summarize in general the scenario for higher education. I would like, it looks very pessimist, but I would like to finish my presentation with a positive comment. I do think that universities are places of innovation, that we stand out because of the creativity of our faculty, and that universities also, generally have leading responses to social problems. So I think that we will be able, or that, I mean, it will need a lot of effort, but I hope that we will be able to face the challenges that this new context is facing. And I would like to finish with this quote by Rodolfo Tuirán, who was professor at El Colegio de Mexico and who was for several years Undersecretary of Higher Education. This is the last paper he wrote before he passed He passed away last year, and it says, universities are refreshing spaces of exchange where the open meeting of intelligences prevail without any discrimination. A diverse dialogue exists based on clarity and rigorosity. Reciprocal understanding is celebrated, a space which welcomes disruptive knowledge and opens the opportunities to the best and most generous expressions of human intelligence. So we have big challenges, but I think that we have the capacity of discussing and finding ways out. Thank you, Marisela.
Thank you very much, Professor. Now we have some minutes for discussion. And I would like to ask you how you see the situation now. What strategy will have to be followed in order to help the students who are more vulnerable, economically speaking? And what would you recommend to be able to correct the gaps and make teaching more efficient?
So do you want me to reply now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I do think that we need to look at what other universities around the world are doing, that we need to share experiences, that we need to not only focus on the problems, but also focus on the advantages, no? But if I were to say, like, the urgent issues that need to be attended in order to reduce this trend of increasing educational inequality would be in terms of the infrastructure, the access to technology, the access to this knowledge on how to teach in this new media for professors and for students. I think infrastructure is the first need in order to move and discuss other challenges that we're facing.
You're right. I agree with you completely. Well, we have some minutes, and now I would like to ask Professor Gao. Professor Gao? Yes. You were talking about the problems in catering companies, in tourism, in cultural and entertainment industry, in transportation industry, and you also said it's needed countermeasures to cope with the impact of COVID-19 on employment. You said it is necessary to promote telecommuting, digital technology, and so on. So now China has achieved growth in its economy, and of the third quarter, as you say, of this year. With this work expectation, do you think that China is able to grow more? Or do you think that the fragility that still prevails could lead a setback? What do you think? What is your forecast for 2021?
Yeah. Okay. Different scholars has different opinion on China's economic forecast. Most of the scholars believe that maybe among the bigger countries, only China maybe can keep positive the economic growth in 2020. Because in China, the situation in the first quarter is very serious. But after that, especially now, China, the economy is normal. And only in only in very limited areas that people have some restrictions moving here and to here and there. But most parts of China are recovered. The economy is normal. I think the recovery is strong. So I myself believe is at least 2% in the growth rate in this year is at least 2%, even to 3%. It's my opinion, but I think most of the scholars will agree with me. About the industries. In terms of the industry structure, because the catering industry, tourism industry, cultural entertainment industry, and transportation industries, it's are affected much. So I strongly recommend the government to support the industries. If the 4 industries can recover well, and I think the Chinese economy will keep better this year. So it's only my opinion.
You're optimistic. Okay, thank you so much, Professor. And now, Professor Martinez, I have a question for you, because you talk about the access of technology. You talk about also about the inequality in the access of technology, in the access to internet. You said that 60% in Mexico do not have a computer and do not have internet access. In this situation, how do you see the relationship professors students now that they have to teach in platforms? How do you see this relationship? How do you see the situation of students? Because in your institutions, you have so many students in one class. How do you see teaching online? It is good? It's really good? Or not?
Well, I think it depends on the teacher and the students, and as Professor Sylvia said, it had to be with the infrastructure and the devices that the students have, and the disposition that we both, teacher and student, have to. So I think the relationship is good, because in the case of the UNAM, the university is giving devices to the students, and we are making campaigns to offer the students, not all of them, because we don't have enough money, but we are being, I think we're being empathic with their situation, and I think that we are improving the creativity, and the most important is that we are respecting the spaces and the privacy of the students, and that is one of the things that the UNAM is very careful So I think that the relationship is good, and the process of teaching and learning, we're doing well. So I think it's about to be that empathic with the deficiencies of students. And one important thing that Professor Sylvia said too is about mental health. You know,
Yeah.
UNAM has campaigns about that too. So any problem that the students have, they had a chance to be supported. So I think we're doing well. The problem is that not all the students has that opportunity, and they don't have the equipment, they don't have internet, they don't have all the requirements to be part of this movement, that of this new normality.
Yeah, that's the problem. And what about the Colegio de Mexico, Professor Yerguli? Isn't there a risk of lowering the academic level?
So
Professor-
I think that, I think that one of the advantages that we have at El Colegio has to do with the size. So it's good because in this session we have the largest university in Mexico, which is UNAM, and then you have the model of a small university that can have a closer follow-up of our students and small groups. In El Colegio de Mexico, the largest groups are of 25, 28 students in the case of some programs of the PhD in history, but that's the largest one. And the teaching load is also not so high. I suppose that it's different when you need to move to this digital distance learning for a class of 3 hours a week or for 2 classes of 3 hours a week, compared to other institutions where professors are teaching 18, 20, 25 hours a week. No? So the conditions are different, and the challenges are also different, even within El Colegio. So what we have found is that professors in economics, for example, have found it very difficult to keep on teaching econometrics, statistics, with the new devices, but also the seminars, and Marisela, you can talk yourself, for example, in the case of the Center for African and Asian Studies, the teaching of Asian and African languages in these platforms totally changed the dynamic within the classroom. No? So I think that we have done a very good job, and that we should feel fortunate because those in higher education, we have been able to keep on working and maintaining a relationship with the students and the professors. It may not be the ideal one. We still need to learn and we can improve it, but we are working on it. And compared to other sectors, as the sectors that Professor Gao mentioned, entertainment, catering, tourism, where there's no possibility of changing and telecommuting, and that's why he showed us the figures that he found. No? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it's not easy. It's not easy. We have to work a lot.
Yes.
And the students also. Well, I think that this situation is so very difficult in China and in Mexico. And we have to think about what we could do, especially academics, especially professors. We have to find solutions for this crisis, and we have to support our students. For them, it's not easy, the situation. They have to work a lot. They don't have a library. They don't have their institutions. So it's very difficult for them. But we are here, and we have to work, and we have to live Thank you very much, Professor Martinez. Thank you very much, Professor Giorguli. Thank you very much, Professor Gao. It was a pleasure to be here with us. Good evening in Mexico. Good morning in China. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marisela. Adiós.
No, gracias. Sí, estuvo muy bien tu presentación.
Gracias, gracias. Gracias, Jessica, mucho gusto. Y bueno, pues.
Mucho gusto, muchas gracias. Muy interesante.
Muchas gracias, profesora
la
Martínez.
presentación.
Muchas gracias.
Nos vemos en la clausura.
Nos vemos en la
De
clausura.
acuerdo. Hasta luego.
Bye.
Bye.